when I come to the end of the year, Matthew was good enough to let me kind of put together a list of 20 or 15 to 20 best films I saw of the year. Mostly a mix of contemporary and old, but mostly older stuff that I'm watching for the first time. This year, things were a little different. In 2024, with a friend of mine, shout out to Bobby Carmi for listening to this, we decided we were going to make our way, finally, because we're both, casual to, generally pretty enthusiastic kaiju fans, and we both decided we were going to finally sit down and watch our way through the entire Godzilla series. We finally finished that in 2025, and that took up a lot of my, not just viewing time, but viewing bandwidth. So my normal list is greatly reduced. But from that, I after watching the entire Godzilla series, I mostly had a good time with it. There were some long stretches of watching. If you're the kind of person who's going to sit down and watch your way through all the Godzilla films, there are going to be chunks of time where you will kind of want to tear your hair out just a little bit, because there's moments where like the franchise settles into a bit of a bad groove, if that makes sense. Very much kind of like oh boy, like we're just kind of.
I believe the term is mediocrity.
Yeah, there's very much moments where the franchise will settle into mediocrity. I am not a fan of most of the Godzilla films from the 60s and 70s that were directed by Jun Fukuda. Godzilla against the Sea Monster and Son of Godzilla and some of those.
Okay.
Because
those are the ones that kind of, I don't know, this sort of like weird allure like something you want to see something weird and trippy from the 60s and 70s? Watch that.
Well, what I mean, let me clarify. The classic era, the oh goodness, I think like not the Heisei era, the Showa era.
Sure. Yeah, sorry to cut you there, is what the Criterion Collection released in a box set.
Yes.
And that is a dream buy for me. I need that in my life, even though I haven't seen all of those films.
Yeah. No, and I do recommend. I think the Showa era is well worth watching. I do recommend it overall. I think for me, because I'm generally someone who needs a little bit of variety in my film, towards the end of the Showa era, there were moments I was starting to struggle a little bit, and then there were moments in the Heisei era that I wanted the Heisei era to be a little more exciting than it was, and then I had a really rough time with the Millennium era. That being said, I had a list of my favorites. I want to say, because I had a pretty extensive list of Godzilla films, but rather than spend your entire podcast talking about Godzilla, I specifically wanted to mention my 5 favorites. Not the original. The original I do love, but I had that on my list last year as kind of, plus I've seen that film, I want to say 2 or 3 times now. Genuinely great. If you haven't seen it, atomic age horror, very dark, not the same tone as the rest of the series at all, but well worth checking out. Do not watch the American re-edit. It is a disaster, and I even ranted about it last year's worst of list, because I described it as a cinematic hit and run. But that out of the way, the 5 Godzilla films from the 5 Godzilla movies from the entire franchise, my favorites. Although I will give a quick shout out to -1 being really good, is the most I really enjoyed -1.
Yeah, a lot of ways, love that film.
But there were 5 movies I wanted to talk about.
Good.
Yeah, -1 was great, but there were 5 I wanted to talk about in more detail. Kicking it off with 1965, we have Invasion of the Astro-Monster, directed by Ishiro Honda, who directed the original and several other very good Godzilla movies. What I love about Invasion of the Astro-Monster is that it's Godzilla meets War of the Worlds. And I do mean that quite literally, because the plot structure of the movie is kind of like War of the Worlds, where it centers around an alien invasion. Essentially, these two astronauts make contact with an alien race who claim that they need to borrow Godzilla and Rodan so they can have them face off against the kaiju that they're having a problem with, King Ghidorah, that Godzilla and Rodan had fought in the previous. Yeah.
I forget King Ghidorah is an actual alien.
Yes, because King Ghidorah is, and this is one of the reasons I love this franchise, King Ghidorah is a dragon from outer space. So, so it turns, and the whole thing, and so Earth has to loans Godzilla and Rodan to these aliens to fight King Ghidorah in exchange for a cure for cancer. Alien invasion hijinks occur. It's no major spoiler to say that the aliens' intentions are not honorable. I mean, we kind of expect that with a movie like this. But the way it plays out, this is probably some of the most fun I had with a classic Godzilla movie. Pulpy, the art style is amazing, reminding me of films that I adore, like Planet of the Vampires or Forbidden Planet. Like very much this like 60s sci-fi aesthetic that I really like. But then you're filtering that through through a Japanese lens, and then you're looking at that through with like Godzilla and other kaiju going on. So that's all great. Next to last of the Showa era, it was like one of the last films of the Showa era, is actually, because I mentioned earlier that I'm not a big fan of Jun Fukuda's Godzilla efforts, because not all of the Showa era Godzilla films were directed by the same people. They changed directors quite a bit behind the scenes. Jun Fukuda had this nasty habit of never directing Godzilla movies I liked. For the most part, because he kind of goes for a very like Hanna-Barbera kind of tone when he does Godzilla in a way that I'm not a big fan of. Things like Godzilla against the Sea Monster, which is one of the biggest wastes of time I've ever seen. I mean, my brother's a little more fond of it, but like I just can't with Godzilla against the Sea Monster. And then some of his other efforts are very cartoony, a lot of characters running around to different locations and minimum. And then like his films in particular started to kind of suffer from a stock footage problem of like reusing footage from earlier Godzilla movies as the Showa era went on. But his triumph, his best Godzilla movie, was also his last. Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. Because Godzilla against
I saw that. Years ago.
Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla is everything about Jun Fukuda's approach to doing Godzilla that I like, without any of the stuff that I don't like. Like it's yes, it's cartoony. Yes, it's like specifically kind of Hanna-Barbera Saturday Morning, but it becomes so deliciously over the top, and the violence is a little harsher, and now there's aliens again, and the Mechagodzilla design is just amazing. The fight between Godzilla and Mechagodzilla is really good. I also really like King Caesar. Yeah, no, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. Truly just an absolute blast. Like the most comic book type Godzilla, one of the most comic booky Godzilla films you'll get from this era. And I think Jun Fukuda's triumph as a director. Moving out of the Showa era into the Heisei era, there are two. I enjoyed the Heisei era at first, but the problem I had with the Heisei era of Godzilla was that they very quickly ran out of ideas. So like they started off, we're going to do Godzilla fresh. We're going to do Godzilla for the 80s and 90s. It's going to be new ideas. And then they very quickly started recycling Showa era ideas. And I was frustrated by that, because I was like, well, I didn't like these when they were in the Showa era. Why would I like them now? So that was incredibly frustrating. But when they got going, the Heisei era was incredibly fresh and very exciting, and there was a lot of really cool places this franchise could go. For example, first film of the Heisei era, Return of Godzilla from 1984, directed by Koji Hashimoto. I love The Return of Godzilla. The Return of Godzilla is genuinely a phenomenal reimagining of the character, because it reimagines Godzilla for the Cold War. Which is very, very interesting. There's a great sequence where representatives from the Soviet Union and America show up in Japan and try to pressure the Japanese government to allow them to use nuclear weapons against Godzilla on Japanese soil, which is about as loaded as you would have gotten for the time. And like the sense of the buildup and the sense of buildup to Godzilla is really well handled. I really like how you don't see Godzilla for much of the opening of the movie, and but then when he finally arrives, he's like, well, it's like you've finally been like, there he is, and it's like, and I really like the visual style will remind you of some of those like 80s horror directors, people like Carpenter or Romero. Like it very much is like in the keeping of people like that. So yeah, a lot to like. I think I had a debate with the same friend. We debated because like the Heisei era, one of the things that they really doubled down on was also the use of technology. So you had kind of more of, rather than just the Japanese military trying to use tanks against Godzilla, you increasingly had like more and more like of this specialized technology type stuff. And like we're flying this special plane that shoots lasers, or this plane combines with this thing to create a mech, that kind of thing. And like I feel like your mileage on that aspect of it may vary as a viewer. as a fan of Pacific Rim, that kind of thing I really appreciate. Like, I think my favorite kaiju films are humans against kaiju. I think my favorite kaiju movies are like humans that in some way they keep that human connection because it's the humans trying to fight the kaiju, whether it's with giant robots or certain types of technology or with more friendly kaiju. Those are my favorite type of kaiju films. But yeah. And then following strong, right after the Return of Godzilla, but with a new director, Kazuki Amori, we then had Godzilla versus Biollante, which
is one that came out recently through Criterion. I know that.
Yeah.
Yes,
I know this one's pretty good. I watched this on Sci-Fi back in the 80s. Great.
Listen, Godzilla versus Biollante.
This was a Saturday morning classic.
Godzilla versus Biollante is not just my favorite Godzilla movie. It's not just one of my favorite films I saw this year. It might be one of my favorite movies of all time because it scratches the same itch. This will make sense in a minute. It scratches the same itch as playing a Hideo Kojima video game.
Right.
Because it's absolutely gonzo. Like, the opening sequence of this movie is a masterpiece. Like, you have American soldiers trying to steal Godzilla DNA from the wreckage from the first movie, and then soldiers from another country are trying to stop them, and then there's secret agents trying to stop them, and there's like this whole thing with like all these different people are like literally the opening, I'm like, this is just straight up a Metal Gear cutscene right now. Like, this is like, you got like 3-4 different factions. And like, if you're a Kojima fan, you know where I'm going with this. The film also gets so delightfully philosophical and so delightfully melodramatic in so many elements, like all these subplots going on. And the character of Biollante herself is truly fascinating. And there's the one member of the Godzilla Defense Force or whatever who's psychic for some reason, and she has a whole thing where she tries to fight Godzilla psychically, and it's one of those movies where they throw everything at the wall to see what sticks, and I think the tapestry that they create that way is truly special. So yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Godzilla versus Biollante was one of the best movies I saw this year, period, but easily one of my all-time favorite Godzilla movies. Gonzo, creative, melodramatic, but like just so confident in itself and so damn effective. And then finishing off with a movie that I'm surprised I don't hear as many people talk about, but going back to kind of things like melodrama, kind of the way, kind of Kojima style writing, and also things like Pacific Rim. This is the one film I really liked from the Millennium era, because there was a film in the Millennium era that I started liking and then didn't, where it's called Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, and it begins with it's Godzilla against a giant bug. But the most interesting part of that movie is that there's an opening sequence where there's a woman who's a member of I kid you not, an anti-Godzilla bazooka squadron. And the rest of her team are all killed in the opening, and she vows revenge against Godzilla. And unfortunately, the movie quickly forgets her. And I'm like, oh, this is not like, if only someone had taken this idea and done something more interesting with it. Well, someone did. And so we got Godzilla against Mechagodzilla from 2002, directed by Masaki Tezuka. The thing about that movie that I adore is that it takes that same subplot, like that opening from Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, and makes it the whole movie. So essentially it's the same deal. You have a woman who's a member of an anti-Godzilla military unit. The rest of her unit are killed by Godzilla, but she is also partially blamed for what happened. So later, the Japanese government decides that they're going to fight Godzilla by taking this, because it's a legacy sequel to the original. One of the problems with the Millennium era is that they kept doing this thing where they kept doing complete reboots, would be like, we're a legacy sequel to the original, ignoring all other films. And more than the other eras, like the Heisei era has a lot of continuity to it. And actually, I would honestly just recommend yeah, you could watch. There's a couple Heisei films you can skip, but for the most part, the Heisei era actually makes for a really good, consistent series, I think. But the Millennium era kept doing these hard reboots. So this film takes place after the original from the 50s, ignoring all other sequels. And what the Japanese government decides is they're going to build an anti-Godzilla mech with human pilots from the bones of the original Godzilla. And what I love about the film, and this is just me being a nerd, it goes into this whole technical process where they have to figure out where they're going to get the money from. They have to get a bill through the Japanese parliament to allocate the funds, but that means there's also a lot of pressure. They have to recruit and train all of the people who are going to like man this thing, and it becomes a really interesting kind of, and again, it's what I was just saying about how my favorite Godzilla movie, my favorite kaiju films in general, are humans against kaiju. So the thing about that's really exciting is that you get to see this whole process of the humans as they work and turn the Godzilla skeleton into a mech. This team being recruited, and you see this woman who's now trying to avenge her fallen team, but also prove herself and prove that she belongs here and that she's just as much right to defend Japan from Godzilla as anyone else. Yes, it's very melodramatic, but I love melodrama, so this is entirely my thing. And the film, and the film, it's very much like the certain sports movies where, it's building up to the big game, as it were, which is like, eventually, that the team is going to have to test themselves against Godzilla in combat, whether or not they can successfully defend Japan from Godzilla. So yeah, like genuinely phenomenal movie. I don't recommend the sequel that they made to it, Tokyo SOS, because it kind of takes the entire premise and undermines it, while also being kind of a lazy Mothra retread, unfortunately, because the whole premise is then the twin fairies come and say, turning the dead Godzilla into a mech is wrong. And I said, we spent a whole movie talking about how not wrong it was, and now you're trying to retroactively decide that it's bad so that we can introduce Mothra as the defender instead. Whatever. But yeah, no. So, and that was my number 5 from 2002, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, which if you are a Pacific Rim fan in particular, I highly recommend this one. Now, normally on this show, I talk about movies. Mostly on the show, I mean, maybe one of these will take place in the kind of year-end album wrap up, but I'm really bad at listening to even worse at listening to new releases than I am at watching new movies. And with books, I'm not a slow reader, but I don't know if I read enough books in a year to make a top 10. I mean, I do, but not enough masterpieces to make a top 10 list. However, this year, between starting a new job as a part-time library assistant and also with a certain film by James Gunn coming out this year, I really decided that actually kind of starting last year. Also, a couple things came together. So James Gunn's movie was coming out. My wife and I were moving to a new apartment, and so we were doing the thing of going through our stuff, putting things in boxes and sorting things to kind of decide what we're keeping, what we're parting with, and what's going. And on top of that, I started the new job. So I realized that despite being a really big Superman fan, and despite even coming on Matthew's show a couple times to talk about Superman, I had not really sat down and gone through the Superman, like the history of like Superman in comics. I had heard that there were some absolute masterpieces out there, but I had never actually sat down myself and like gone through and read the Superman comics in much depth, and both runs and also standalone stories as well. So I decided kind of mid to late 2024, I kind of started, reading the Superman books that I already had, borrowing some from the library, and kind of using the ILL library team. Shout out to the ILL department at my branch. If you're listening to this, you guys are rock stars. But very much like going through and finally, reading. And I think what ended up happening is I have read just about every Superman, like not runs. Again, I cannot stress this enough. I need to sit down with some of the runs of Superman. I'm kind of slowly making my way through. Oh goodness. With one particular run, but for the most part, I'm kind of more slowly kind of making my way. But when it comes to runs are a little more difficult because we all know how long comics can be. But that being said, when it comes to miniseries and standalone storylines and titles, what ifs, Elseworlds, all that kind of thing, I read just about everything I can get my hands on. If you could name a Superman comic, I've probably read it at this point. And I recently posted on my social media my full list of all the ones that I read this year that I thought were really good, like the full list of all the ones I really enjoyed. But as a special for Matthew's podcast specifically, on this show, It's a Wrap, I am giving my top 10 Superman comics that I read in a rare, rather than talking about movies, talking about comic books. Like with my regular lists, I will go oldest to newest, so I don't have to rank them because I am a coward like that. But anyway, oldest on the list, from 1986. We're gonna start really strong with Alan Moore's "Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow."
Yeah, boy.
Genuine
classic
masterpiece.
Yeah.
If you have not read this, it's essentially, again, as the name implies, it's essentially kind of a hypothetical last run of Superman. Historically, what was happening was, Crisis on Infinite Earths had happened. DC was kind of wrapping up. DC was about to reboot Superman with John Byrne. Oh, John Byrne is the run that I'm currently kind of in the middle of reading. His run is interesting. Well, it starts really strong. I think there's like some soap opera kind of elements I'm not a big fan of, but it's comics in the 80s, But in order to clear the way for John Byrne's run on Superman, in order to give Superman a fresh start, the folks at DC wanted to give the Silver Age Superman, who had been running this whole time, a kind of a last hurrah story. And so they bring in Alan Moore, one of my all-time favorite writers, period. And I think some of the work that he did with Superman is
very salty man, but yes,
he's salty man. I mean,
true.
I mean, listen, if you've seen what DC did to Watchmen, I kind of get it.
I mean, DC, what DC do to Watchmen is basically like you ever saw that parody ad of Watchmen as a Saturday morning cartoon?
Yeah,
it's basically that. Wow, what the fuck?
It's like, well, imagine how do you miss the point so badly?
So badly. For real.
But whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow is Alan Moore giving the Silver Age Superman a kind of last hurrah, kind of a dignified send-off. And it's really, really moving. I'm not going to get much into the details, but essentially there's this whole metatextual element of, a new age of comic books is kind of coming, where there's death and real consequences and stuff like this. And kind of this new reality is kind of creeping in on the world of the Silver Age. Which creates this whole interesting, and some of the most powerful Superman writing you'll ever see comes at this particular time. Some of the ways that certain characters are realized and some of the way certain things happen is truly special and truly fascinating. And the way it all concludes, the way it all ends, is something that I could write an entire essay about. Like the finale, the way that this ends, and why Superman does what he does at the end of the story, is something I could write an entire essay about. As just a beautiful understanding of the character, but also why certain filmmakers that I am tired of talking about can go, I don't know, watch Rise of Skywalker. I don't know. Walk
off up here. Yes, I can.
walk off a pier and watch Rise of Skywalker at the same time. I wouldn't inflict that on anyone. But anyway, whatever happened to Man of Tomorrow, Alan Moore, masterpiece. Another masterpiece that I really love, from 1998, as part of kind of an ongoing series of kind of early Superman, one-shot stories that were being done by DC at the time, is Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's Superman for All Seasons.
Yep. Yeah, boy.
Okay, never read that.
Another classic of classics.
You have to read whatever. Oh yeah, because Superman for All Seasons, one of basically set during the early days of Superman's time in as Superman, while kind of coming to terms he's early to this. He's coming to terms with a lot of things, but also
Does the one with his daughters, right?
No, you're thinking of Secret Identity. Secret Identity. Yeah. That one is also really good. It didn't make my top 10, but no, Secret Identity was one that I was actually skeptical about at first, and then I read it and I was like, oh boy, this is actually a masterpiece.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, No, All Seasons is the one that's...
What was it plot of Superman All Seasons, right?
So that's the one. Well, first of all, it's set. I mean, it's the one where Lex Luthor is like he has that whole thing where he tries to make Superman think that he's carrying some kind of alien virus or whatever that poisons people. Turns out to be, it's a typical Lex Luthor crap. There's 4 sections.
Oh no, right. I try to remember this one. This one is the one with the very bulky look. That is what I was trying to remember.
Yes, yes, very bulky look.
Interesting art style. Yeah.
Very much a follow-up to Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's Batman The Long Halloween. Similar conceit of the framing device being centered around like kind of times of the year and things like that. Like but no. What I love about it is we see a very human Superman. This is a Superman who has, but I also love that each segment is told from the perspective of a different person who isn't Superman. So like one of the sections is from the perspective of Lex Luthor, one is from Lois Lane, I think one's from Lana Lane. It's been a minute, but like, yeah, it's just genuinely incredible writing, incredible artwork, and the narrative structure of it is something that I geek out on about at all times. Yeah, no, it's Superman for All Seasons. This is probably going to be another classic of classics, and this is one of the only single issue. This is the only single issue that made my top 10. But this is Action Comics number 775. What's so funny about Truth, Justice, and the American Way?
Classic.
Written by Joe Kelly. Yeah. Genuinely
classic.
Incredible.
Shout out, you should look up. There's this guy who does a lot of reviews. Shout out to watch this guy on YouTube. Steve Shipes. He has a kind of a series called The Best Superman Ever, and it's just run through these things. I'm like, yeah, right. I forget about this. So like, I read this in a while. Like, yeah. I like, yeah. So
I'll keep that. Yeah, no, I'll keep.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your recommendation, Ricardo. Because I am so far behind when it comes to these Superman titles. I just kind of sell myself out there, but I want to learn about them.
Yeah, well, I think for me, one of the best things about it is that like I find Superman, if reading your way through Superman the way I did is really interesting because it provides a really fascinating kind of snapshot of comics, because some of the biggest names at some point have written Superman titles, and you kind of get you get kind of, for better or for worse, you get kind of you kind of get a snap of kind of the different trends that DC was going through at the time. I had a whole conversation again with my friend Bobby. We were talking about how DC for the longest time was the house that Superman built. That Superman was their biggest character and their flagship character. And then around the 80s got replaced in that role by Batman, but is still considered one of the most important, like the most important characters in comics. And so people who get to write Superman always bring a special level of kind of reverence to the character. Some of them do it really badly, but other people do bring a certain like reverence to the character, and they tell some like really special stories. What's so funny about Truth, Justice, and the American Way is really cool because,
and I remember not liking the animated movie of this. I wasn't a fan of that. I am not especially interested in, like, I had an unfortunate discovery this year where I was like, wait, are all the DC animated films just slightly poorer versions of much better comics? Kinda, right. And I remember thinking, wait, it kind of messes up, but I haven't read the original in a while, and I'll go back and read the original. It's like, nah, man, the movie wasn't that great. Like it's still good. It still gets the core message well enough, I suppose.
Yes, and I like that. I like that core message a lot, like the idea of like this team of superheroes that they do the things that Superman doesn't do. They kill, they get involved in like geopolitical stuff.
It evolved the idea of Kingdom Come in really good ways. Like, because I think this came after Kingdom Come, and Kingdom Come had a really like interesting conceit and message for what it was trying to do, especially in the early 90s.
And Joe Kelly is a Superman writer who I have complicated relationship with, because he's not always my favorite Superman. Joe Kelly is not always my favorite Superman writer, but this is very similar to what I was saying earlier about Jun Fukuda with Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. This is his best work easily. What's so funny about Truth, Justice, and the American Way feels like pulling out all the stops, and genuinely doing the absolute best work that he has ever done with the character. So yeah, I really appreciated that one. And that, again, since it's a single issue, I mean, it's a little longer than usual, but since it's a single issue, it's still a quick read. So I highly recommend it. A little bit of a curveball, but I had a hard time with Jeff Johns' Superman writing. I found Jeff Johns is not. I like him writing Green Lantern, but even then, sometimes he will come up with a bad idea. But for the most part, I like him writing Green Lantern. His Superman stuff was very hit or miss. I kind of hated the entire New Krypton saga because the New Krypton saga has problems with. It has all the Event Comics bullshit problems, essentially, of like too many characters, too many plot lines, interesting ideas getting drowned out, big, bombastic in bad ways, and like plot beats and plot points that make no damn sense whatsoever. And there were a couple other Jeff Johns. Like I was a little underwhelmed by Superman Last Son, and a little I liked Superman Brainiac. I wish I liked it a little more, but I liked it. I didn't love it.
Last one was, I understand the hate for last one. Like, you have hate for last one out there. I can't go that far for me, but I get why people wouldn't really care for it, to be honest.
Yeah, find a little underwhelming. But there were some absolute bright spots. I really love Superman Escape from Bizarro World, where Jeff Johns teams up with the same artist who does The Goon. Really, really phenomenal comic, and it is a great job. That was actually what got me to read The Goon and his true crime comic. Did you hear what Eddie Gein done? Which is, by the way, one of the greatest things I read all year. Jesus Christ! Like, did you hear what Eddie Gein done? Is kind of what I would call the first text in what I would call post true crime, which I feel like is a growing collection of fiction that I am noticing of people actually being people analyzing true crime itself. Like because did you hear what Eddie Gein done doesn't just tell the story of Ed Gein.
They kind of work in paranoia of a lot of true crime.
Right. They also kind of look at how, as the trial was happening, we were already seeing people swarming around, making this into a bigger and bigger story. You already had people who had never really heard of Ed Gein, even though he lived in their town, suddenly coming up with wild stories to kind of add to the media frenzy that was going on.
Yeah, does you remember? What was the thing with the fella during the I think it was the '96 bombing of Atlanta Olympics.
Yes.
And what happened to that dude's life? It was the most bizarre piece of paranoia around that. It was real wild. That get real wild. Yeah.
Well, and I think, and to the point where the guy did so much research for this comic, and they did a meticulous amount of research to the point, I have not seen a comic in a hot minute that ends with a works cited section where they mention all the different things, explaining here's where we got everything, to the point where they called Netflix out on this Ed Gein series they're working on as nah, I know all the research you didn't do. But going back, Jeff Johns is a writer that I had a great time with Escape from Bizarro World, but his best for me is from 2008, Superman and the Legion of Superheroes.
Oh, okay.
Which I really like that one in particular because the Legion of Superheroes is one of those parts of comics that I think trying to explain to someone who doesn't read comics is wait, say that again. Because again, the whole conceit of it, for those of you in the audience who are unaware, is that the Legion of Superheroes is a superhero team of kind of teenage superheroes from the future who are all inspired by.
We know who they are. Yeah, we know who they are. Right, but there's
kind of
Gravity Boy and Cosmic Boy and them.
Yeah, and all these, and they're some of the most over the top superheroes you'll ever meet. They are pure product. Right, they are pure products of the Silver Age in a great way, but they are difficult characters to write as a result. Jeff Johns, in my opinion, for Superman: The Legion of Superheroes, does a great job because what he does is he creates this story where the now adult members of the Legion go back in time and they bring Superman to the future because there's an
animated series based on this. It's short-lived, one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay, they did that. And then,
I remember that, but that's mainly because it always pops up every time I'm looking for Blu-rays, basically.
And then they mostly type Supergirl in most modern incarnations. So because
I think
Yeah, I know that Johns, I think, was one of the first writers to kind of make Supergirl more involved in the Legion. Because in the original Silver Age comics, because that was when Superboy was still a thing, which one of those fascinating retcons of like, Superman had a whole bit in his teenage years where he was Superboy flying around Smallville fighing, and then they
then they also the Supergirl TV show with Melissa Benoist did that. Play with that a lot, and that's solid stuff. One of my favorite episodes of Superman the Animated Series did this one where they went back. 3 of them go back in time to stop Brainiac from killing Clark in the past. Great episode.
Oh wow.
Mostly because the Kents was just kicking ass with shotties. That's what I love about it.
Okay, I'll keep an eye out for that one. I'm excited.
Smallville did a couple of that too, which halfway on it. But Smallville did a little bit of that.
But that's also Smallville for you. Like Smallville is very hit or miss that way. But But this particular story does such a great thing because what happens, and this is where I was shocked they went in this direction. Essentially, what has happened is in the future, Superman's alien origin has become lost. Essentially, what has happened is Earth historians got the record mixed up, and rather than everyone understanding that Superman was an alien from Krypton, there's this, because what has happened is the government of Earth and the new superhero team that protects Earth have gone in a really xenophobic direction, and they have appropriated Superman, and they have, they've pushed it back against the idea that he was an alien, and they'd be like, no, he was the best of humans. It was only an alien conspiracy to make us think that Superman was an extraterrestrial. Superman was the best of humanity had to offer. And so what's happened is Earth has become incredibly xenophobic. It has left the Galactic Federation. And so there's this whole tension of the Legion go back in time to try and bring Superman into the present into their present so he can stop that. What I love about this story is that in a really smart way, very similar to another that I really love that didn't quite make it on here, Superman Birthright. They play with that idea of what it means for Superman to be an alien and kind of what that means for Earth and what that means and kind of the way it relates to xenophobia and the fear of the other and all these things. Like, how does it mean that Earth's greatest defender is himself, and the whole thing that led to all the controversy with Dean Cain earlier this year, James Gunn referred to Superman as an immigrant from another planet, and suddenly a whole bunch of right-wing talking heads started getting really upset about it. So things like Superman and the Legion of Superheroes has only aged better because, there are people that don't want to admit that Superman is an alien. They don't want to talk about Superman in terms of being an immigrant. They don't want to talk about it in those terms. And seeing Superman himself fight back against that image and that perception becomes something really powerful. Also, while celebrating the Legion and just how amazingly just like wild the Legion of Superheroes can be at times.
So, a guy who does bonks like a ball.
One of his superpowers, he inflates super big and bounces around like.
And then there's a good descendant of Brainiac. Like, all right, would
the Legion is bonkers, and I at first I was a little put off by them, but then the more I've read of them, I'm like, oh, okay, I have a soft spot for these guys. Getting into my number 5, and this goes back to that same kind of early Superman miniseries idea that certain writers were doing at DC at one point. This is from another writer I fell in love with this year. From 2008, again, so same year as Legion of Superheroes. This is Darwin Cook's Superman Kryptonite. Another
solid.
Darwin Cook. I love Darwin Cook so much. That man was taken from us too soon. I'm so sad. I need to read more of his stuff. I've read all of his Parker adaptations. I read Justice League New Frontier, which is amazing. But I really think that Superman Kryptonite might be one of his best works because, again, this is Superman. Again, early Superman. He's fighting crime and, but he's dealing with a particular issue. As far as he's aware, he is completely invulnerable and completely immortal. He hasn't found anything that kills him yet. And you'd think that would be amazing. But for him, it creates this existential
you don't know what could kill you. Yeah.
Right, you don't know what could kill you, and there's an anxiety there. There's a brilliant anxiety of like
great premise.
It's amazing, and like there's like there's so many incredible moments in it. Like there's this whole thing where it's like, of course, Superman is the kind of
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Superman, like, of course, Superman's the kind of sort of person. If he sees a plane trying to crash into a volcano, of course he's going to dive in and get it, even if he doesn't know yet whether or not a volcano will kill him. Like that's who Superman is, and I think that that aspect of it is like really fascinating. I really loved it. I think that like there's some plot points that are a little convoluted, but I didn't mind those as much. Like I didn't mind some of the slightly more convoluted storytelling because I think it stays so grounded in its central conceit, and its central conceit is so good that I really responded to it.
Yeah, I just want to yell out a couple, but these are the edgy ones that I like, but I understand why people might not like them. So I actually like Superman Earth 1. I enjoyed it for it was.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I dug it for it was. Another one that this is because the creator is kind of trash, but I remember enjoying it when it came out. American Alien. I remember.
You liked American Alien?
Yeah. I was in the camp that actually like American Alien for what it was. Again, I get what you're trying to go for.
Okay, so for those who aren't in the know like me, right?
With that one.
Yeah, for those who aren't in the know like me, what's the problem with that book?
Yeah.
Landis.
Max Landis is the creator. It's also I have a problem with that one as well because it's an anthology, but they're all written by the same guy, which kind of takes away the point of.
I'm a sucker for anthologies. Like if you do it right, especially with Superman, you could make it work.
I've got two titles later on that I think are gonna like if you I think you've read these, but if you haven't read these, I think you'll get a big kick out of these.
I am even though it's not technically him alone, because the whole thing as a whole reboot right now, I am absolutely loving the Absolute Superman. They kind of fucking cook with this character. I really like what
Okay. I've been on the fence about that one. Everyone's been telling me I need to read it.
Yes, I find the Superman stuff is good. Like everything not great. I like Wonder Woman. I think Pong for Pong is the best. Batman is the most popular, but I'm not loving all of it. But
I am very interested in Absolute Martian Manhunter.
That is the best one too. That's real good.
I'm very invested in Absolute Martian Manhunter. Like
cook with that. Like that is excellent. But like Pong for Pong, I'd say Wonder Woman is my favorite. Superman is my second favorite. That one is pretty good, but it's weird and offbeat. But I'm loving that too. But Superman, they make so many like weird and interesting changes. Like, but that's a good idea though. Like, I'm surprised nobody think about that. Like the cape is with him, and the cape is kind of like Eradicator. Like, what? That's kind of cool. Like, that's a cool idea. Like, I like that. They're doing some interesting things. Like, whatever. I vibe it. That is my vibe. Whatever.
So then,
as a kid, my don't yuck my yum, right? So,
go ahead. No, you're fine. Right. I will not yuck your yum. Okay, last five. So number 6, and this is going to be another. Of course, if you're talking about greatest Superman titles, you kind of have to talk about this one. And Gunn himself mentioned it up with For All Seasons as a big inspiration for his film,
right?
But All-Star Superman.
Of course.
2011.
Yeah. Classic one. I know that one.
Oh my God, like All-Star.
Even though I don't like the animated movie off of it, the animated movie still.
I'm not.
My issue is that they just really try to condense those 12. I think it's 12 issues, right?
Yeah. It should be a little longer. It could be 2 parts and take it. It just contains too much in it. But I still enjoy it for what it was.
Yeah, that was a problem.
Since All-Star Superman is very similar to Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, kind of being like a kind of a last hurrah story. Right. And I think that kind of story needs to breathe. That kind of story needs to have space. It needs to like truly like, and I really like the idea of a Superman who knows he's dying and is trying to like go around taking care of the last things that he's been meaning to take care of. It's a really moving story. My one thing. I need comic book fans to stop recommending this one as the first Superman comic you should read.
Right.
For 2 reasons.
True.
One.
True.
This is a
This is like a Star Trek fan hyping up yesterday's Enterprise. Like, you won't appreciate yesterday's Enterprise.
You won't. Yesterday's Enterprise won't mean anything to you if you're like less into stuff or like Trials and Tribulations if you've seen DS9. Like some of these are like they reward you for being a little more invested. Like you're not going to be quite as invested if you don't know. So All-Star Superman is a masterpiece, but it kind of it's a masterpiece for people who have read more Superman and a lot of these references and these characters and this lore. And so seeing some of these conclusions, like, what they end up doing with the bottled city of Kandor and the Superman response squad and things like that. These are things that will have the most emotional impact if you actually have read other Superman stories and you know what the hell the bottled city of Kandor is and stuff like that. So yeah, great piece. Absolutely amazing. I love Frank Quitely's artwork. I understand why it's not newcomers' favorite, because I'm like, okay, listen, I think another Frank Quitely one that I think is actually a little better for newcomers is Justice League Earth 2. I think that one's really good. So yeah, All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison from 2011. This next one is one that to me is up there with Kryptonite and For All Seasons, and it's part of that same writing of like early Superman, like that same thing. But I don't understand why it doesn't get more hype than it does, which is 2019's Man and Superman by Marv Wolfman.
Right. Oh, never heard of that. I love the title.
Yeah, exactly.
That title sounds great.
I just think it's a recency bias, and it's also, I would argue, it's also very post culture war stuff. Like if this came out earlier, people would be raving about it. But like, it's too recent.
Right. Well, I think what happens with Man and Superman, and if you're like Matthew, if you don't know about it, the premise is simple. A young Clark Kent has just arrived in Metropolis, like the brand new, just arrived in Metropolis. He's got his resume. He's ready to go apply for some of these newspapers. He wants to work at the Daily Planet, but Daily Planet is a pretty big, prestigious newspaper, and he's just off getting his journalism degree in college. But he's also got the Superman costume, because they've got the suit. He has the plan. He's gonna start doing the Superman thing. He gets to Metropolis and he hesitates because he knows that once he does that first bit of Superman, like once he gets in the suit and flies up there and saves the first person, the world will never be the same again. His life won't be the same ever again. And so he hesitates. And so he doubts himself. And so we follow a period of a few weeks where you see a Superman kind of, and like there's a Lex Luthor plot going on in the background, because of course there is, involving like, arms and trade and that kind of thing. But what you have is a few days where you have this Clark Kent wrestling with, because he's still Superman, even though he's not Superman yet, but he's still super. So like one of my favorite panels is this one where he's in his room in this kind of dingy with kind of a dingy apartment somewhere in like one of Metropolis's rougher areas, just lying there, sitting there on his bed, overwhelmed by all the people that he hears in the city crying for help.
Right.
It is so powerful and so moving, but also just the like kind of being a young person in particular, who wants to get your life started, and you kind of find yourself hesitating. Like you're not sure where you're going. You're not sure whether you're as good at what you want to do as you think you are.
Right.
And like,
I call it, let's call it again. Where you think you're fake now? Okay, what's the name?
Yes,
imposter syndrome, Ricardo.
Yeah, imposter syndrome. Yeah. Well, like, and like Superman, and like, and there's a whole thing where like, he's got the resume, but again, the Daily Planet is a really prestigious newspaper. They're not just going to hire him right away, so he's got to slum it as a janitor for a little bit, and like try to figure out how he's going to like actually. And it's so simple, but so powerful. And if you get the special collector's edition,
right? Well, I never read that.
The special collector's edition is especially great because, I mean, the story is the same, but there's an extensive period. I mean, the whole back half, which is for me really cool, is all about how you make a comic. It's all about like, here's the page, here's what comic book scripts looks like, here's what this looks like, here's some of the early sketches, here's how we turn those into art.
I want to see that. That sounds great.
It's really cool. No, it's really cool. And like getting to see getting this really powerful Superman story, and then you get it with this little thing talking about how the sausage is made and like getting into the more technical side of it. It's like, that's really cool. So yeah, Man and Superman. I feel like this is one that like as time goes on, and I am, again, 2019, but I'm out here. I will champion this one till the cows come home. Like I'm like if you have not read this one, go ahead and read this one, please. Man and Superman by Marv Wolfman. If you need any further like prompting in the introduction, Marv Wolfman said as he was writing it that he had this moment of, I think this might be the best thing I've ever read, which, knowing what Marv Wolfman has contributed to comic books, is like a wild claim, but you're like, I kind of get what you mean, you know. The last three are all from the 2020s, so there is going to be the recency thing, so they're going to be a little less classic status, but I do think that like one of them is already, I think I kind of see more and more having classic status, and then the other two are very recent, so I hope they're going to build in classic status. But number 8 from 2020, Tom King's Superman Up in the Sky.
Yeah, okay. I am halfway on Tom King. God, I really like his Supergirl.
Yes.
I really like his Supergirl, but he's kind of bottom sometimes. Whatever.
He's an interesting one as a writer, because I know what you like literally. Okay, Heroes in Crisis is a catastrophe. Right. Heroes in Crisis is a terrible comic book because it's trying to handle something serious, and somehow the way it goes about it is absolutely backwards. So yeah, no, like Heroes in Crisis is an absolute disaster. I have been mostly pleasantly surprised by Tom King. Otherwise, I really liked his Vision series. His Adam Strange book is a goddamn masterpiece. If I was just doing favorite comics I read this year, his Adam Strange is amazing because it's probably one of the best detective mystery comics I've ever read, and the conceit of it, of like, if you have not read. It's called, I think it's Adam Strange. Yeah, it's Tom King's Adam Strange book. Like if you haven't read it, like, oh my god, it's amazing. And then like the other two, I'm less fond of his Mr. Miracle one than I think most people are.
Right.
But that's a personal preference. But yeah, no, he's an interesting writer. But his Superman story, Up in the Sky, is kind of amazing to me because like it nails so much of the psychology of Superman. Like, you know, a girl, like, again, short version of the plot, right? Girl gets abducted by aliens. Superman has to decide whether he's going to stay on Earth and protect all the people of Earth, or travel into the deep recesses of space and find this little girl. Of course, he's going to do the second one, right? Because he's Superman. Right. But like, that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. And it doesn't mean that like his journey to travel there is going to be like an easy one. Like, and the whole thing, I would actually recommend this. I think is like a really good beginner text for people just getting into comics, of like kind of one of the best ways to get into Superman, because I think that it gives you such a good rundown of the character and kind of what he's about, that I think if you like it, then it's like, okay, now here's a whole bunch of other stuff, and it's simple enough and not too complicated enough that it becomes a nice entryway. I mean, it's got a great sense of humor at times as well, but like it's also just, I don't know, the best part of it for me, there's this whole issue where Superman is trying to like call Earth to make sure that Lois Lane is okay. And the whole time he is sitting there, he has to use his like alien phone, and there's like a ridiculously long, like cartoonishly long line to use the phone. It's like an intergalactic phone. And the whole time he is just anxiety spiraling of all the terrible things that could be happening to Lois Lane back on Earth. Right. It's one of those things where it's funny, but it's also, you know, dark, and you understand, and it's also kind of relatable. Like it's also very much like if you're the kind of person who has that level of anxiety, it's like, yeah, I think if you've ever had a friend or a partner who you like texted and they took a little bit too long to respond, and you just kind of spiral the whole time being like, oh god, what happened to them? It's right. The kind of thing where you're like, okay, yeah, I completely understand where Superman's coming from with this thing. Now the last two, and this goes back to what we were saying earlier about American Alien, the last two are both anthologies. They're both recent anthologies, but they're both anthologies. And so obviously with an anthology, the quality of the individual stories varies, but I think both of these overall, even if they have a couple weak stories, I still think that overall they are incredibly strong work. So from 2021, Superman Red and Blue.
Okay.
Which brilliant if you have not read it. So essentially the premise is simple. A host of comic book writers and artists were given a pretty simple assignment. They were all told to write Superman stories, and they had to be short, But the other thing was that they all had to have the color scheme red and blue. There was a similar thing that happened with
I don't want to get. Hopefully, I don't want to get horrible flashbacks of the red Superman, blue Superman bullshit back in the 90s.
Oh God! Why do you have to remind me? Why do you have to remind me? Why did you?
So embarrassing, huh?
That is stupid. Like I remember when they jump scared me with that crap in oh goodness, like when I read Superman, like the Y2K Superman Y2K, and then suddenly it's like he switches to blue Superman. I'm like, who is this hideous abomination? But no, I think what happens is because these are short stories, you get some really phenomenal writers doing like some of their best work,
right?
And then because the visual constraints are simply, you can use whatever art style you want, but the color scheme has to be red and blue, or it has to use red and blue. Like there's a really powerful one I really like where it's black and white, but it's Superman, and he's talking to the imp, Mr. Mitzblitz or whatever, and Mitzplickle or whatever his name is.
Mitzia Spitlick.
Mitzia Spitlick.
I'm not even gonna try.
You will learn this. You will learn this in the couple of episodes he shows up in Superman the Animated Series because
good to know.
The late great Gilbert Gottfried voiced him. It's great.
Oh really?
Oh right, that was him. Right. I forgot about that.
Jeez, yeah. No, I spent all year reading Superman comics, and every time I came across that name, I was like, sure.
Yeah.
Sure, whatever.
I was backward name, killed Tipsyism. Yeah, whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so essentially, and he's got this like essentially the premise of this particular story being that he has stolen all the world's color. Right. And Superman is like, we want and no one knows it's been stolen except him, and he's like, I don't know what this color is, but you better give it back. And he's like, well, what if I only give you the colors red and blue? And then he releases it, and it's beautiful. If you are on social media at all, there's one of these stories you have probably seen. I've seen it making the rounds a lot, especially in reels. But there's this great one. Oh goodness, where essentially it begins with Pa Kent going to a priest and saying hey, like back when Superman is young, and he's like. And he's talking about, opening up to this priest about hey, I'm new to this whole father thing and I'm still figuring it out. And, the priest explains well, I think as long as your son knows how you feel about him, you'll do a good job raising him. And so then we not only see how Jonathan Kent keeps that, uses that as his most effective tool to fall back on when raising Superman, but then Superman internalizes that, and it kind of informs his relationship with the human race. It's beautiful. There's just so many great stories in this. Again, not every single story in this collection is a masterpiece, but good Lord, there are enough masterpieces that I can confidently recommend this one. And then finally, this is a weird one. This is a very strange one. And this one came out this year, but I have a great big soft spot for it. Because I think one of the big criticisms of Superman that a lot of people like to come up with is that
I know what you're going to say, and is it worse excuse? Is it worse criticism?
Right. One of the big criticisms, people like to claim that Superman is a purely American character. They're Superman doesn't have any relatability or interest outside of America. He's such a jingoistic American character or whatever. It's a genuinely terrible take. It's one of those things. It's depressing because, like I mentioned earlier, Superman was DC's flagship character, and then around the 90s they shifted to Batman, and you can tell that DC has kind of lost confidence in the character. There's so many times in this, I remember before Gunn came out with his film, during that weird period where they were trying to get Man of Steel 2 made, and they were shopping it to different directors, an internal memo leaked where it was revealed that a lot of the bosses at Warner Brothers were nervous about a Superman film because they couldn't figure out whether he would be relatable. They were like, I don't know how we can make this
argument. Yeah, go ahead.
It's very much how do we make this character interesting and relatable, especially to an international audience? Because again, there's this weird perception of Superman as a very American character. So, in direct response to this claim, DC came out with an anthology that I really want them to put out a volume 2 at some point, which is from this year, actually, 2025, Superman the World.
Okay. I never watched this. I never read it too.
It's like Red and Blue. The quality of the individual stories varies, but essentially the premise is simple. DC gets a whole bunch of extensive cast of comic book writers and artists from all over the world, and they each get to write a Superman story.
I love that idea. That is fantastic.
It's dude, brilliant. It's brilliant. Yeah. Like there's this really gorgeously drawn one from early on. That's the one from Spain, where essentially a Superman, like it's a little bit. I love it, even though it's like essentially it's the writers gushing about how beautiful Spain is, and I'm like, okay, yeah, if you draw it this good, like I believe. And like Superman kind of wandering around Spain without his powers briefly while he's recharging them in the like sunlight, and kind of being like, oh wow, this place really is stunning, isn't it? And I'm like, listen.
I do want to research for Spain one thing.
It's like, yeah, way to rep your country, but yeah, like there's some, like I think. Yeah, they get like oh man, so many of these are so good. They got one from a team from Serbia. They got one from a team from the Czech Republic. I can't remember which. I think Gambia or Ghana or like one of those places like that. They got one from India, Mexico, Brazil. Like it's such a wide range, and they gave these teams so much freedom to interpret Superman in a way that like not like obviously keeping the idea that he is Superman, but like very much this idea that Superman is not just a superhero for America, he is a superhero for the world, and kind of allowing him to be that sort of character. And yeah, no, it's genuinely stunning. And especially as, again, someone international, talking to other international people right now and talking about how like we're all Superman people. Like we are Superman. Like we love this character. We know a lot about this character. So getting to see a work like this, which is people from the rest of the world getting to celebrate Superman, was something that was quite genuinely very special for me.
I just have my quick list just since you mentioned it.
Go ahead.
The more recommendations I hear, the better is for me, because I'm gonna seek out all of these.
We got to get Matthew on the Superman train.
Right. So, but stuff I thought you would have mentioned, but it's like, let me just mention since I did right.
Okay, yeah.
For the man who has everything.
No, absolutely, yeah.
Kind
so
of a classic. All of these like popular classics anyway, so it's like I'd say nothing super new, but you know.
I think I like.
I like Superman.
Say that again.
Must there be a Superman? Great story.
Oh, I think. I think.
Yeah, the classic.
Who wrote that
one? Yeah, the classic. Well, you mentioned Legion of Superheroes. Last Son of Krypton. Super Sons, pretty good.
Okay.
Well, you mentioned whatever Man of Tomorrow. Of course, this is a classic, and I'm surprised. I thought you would have mentioned this one. Superman smashes the Klan. Great.
I love that one. No, that one's. I read this again. Only it's on my. Some of these are on my full list on Facebook, but like I was trying to reduce to like my top 10. But yeah, Superman smashes the Klan is so good.
Right. No. And then the one with the daughters, which I really liked. I read that recently.
Yes, Superman's Secret Identity. That was probably. If I had to mention the Superman story that surprised me the most, it would probably be that one, because again, the premise, like, what if Superman was born in a world where Superman existed, like the Superman, the character, that one.
It's so weird. It's a weirdly meta one, but it's worked though.
Yeah, I was so surprised that it works. Like I read it and I was like, okay. I mean, it's Kurt Busiek, and I think that was to me very much the kind of moment of like, oh, okay, Kurt Busiek gets Superman. Like this is really good. But Secret Identity is really good. And I think that that's another good one. I would agree with you. I think it's a good one for people that are kind of. Because it's also self-contained enough that I don't think it like if you read it.
I want to try to remember.
How do you feel about the two Superman 78?
Right, I like that too. I like
those two? Okay.
Yeah.
I really like, especially I like those a lot. Like I actually I have not read it yet. I'll probably read it.
Right. I was going to do a joke one, but with the Superman versus Muhammad Ali.
Really? That one?
That exists.
I never read it, but I just know about that cover. That's all I know.
Yeah.
Superman versus Muhammad Ali is great. Superman, because it's like it's not the most serious Superman in the world, but it is. But it's a good time. It's a good. And I
the
think
reason
that, like,
the reason I use the comic is because of I talk about like when I get into debates about like history and who should acknowledge history and so on. So I make that point. It's like yeah. We believe Muhammad Ali was a person, but did he fight Superman in 1978 or whatever? And it's like, and then I'll bring out, but look at the evidence. Look at the evidence of this person. Look at him. He did fight Superman. That bullshit. Like, you get the point, right? Right.
Yeah,
and it's stuff like that. Yeah.
How do you?
You mentioned.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you like John Byrne's run on Superman. How do you feel about the his original miniseries Man of Steel, like the one that launched his run on Superman?
Right. No, Man of Steel is solid. Like it's not. It's not memorable, but it's like, okay, it's more like you're just thinking of the character. Sorry, you're thinking of the author and the character is like, all right, this guy going places. But I remember not thinking it's like, it didn't blow me or anything like that. And I read that pretty late. It's more like I went back to see, okay, I see why this guy had a future. Kind of
yeah,
thing. That's it. Yeah.
Well, and for me, it's really interesting because I have a friend. Who loaned me a little bit of kind of John Byrne and Chris Claremont's run on X-Men, and I think that really because I know that like John Byrne got to write Superman because he had worked with Chris Claremont on X-Men, if I remember the timeline correctly. Like very much like okay, you know how to breathe life into these comic book characters here. Yeah. Our biggest character, we're trying to reimagine our biggest character. And I do think that John Byrne's run overall, from what I've read so far, is pretty good. It's running into some, again, soap opera problems, and I have a friend who's really getting into Wonder Woman, and the two of us were bonding over how much we hate it when DC editorial tries to pair up Superman and Wonder Woman.
Right.
Like that's never not a bad idea.
Okay, so it usually sometimes you could I have a couple examples where I think it kind of works. Like, but yeah, for the most part, it almost never works.
Kingdom Come is a good example of it working. That was one that Kingdom Come is weird because Kingdom Come is to me one of the greatest comics ever made. I would have included it on this list if I felt that it was a Superman, right? It's not quite a Superman comic. No. It's very much like a Justice League DC Universe comic. Right. But yeah, no, just the kind of recap. My top 10 Superman comics that I read this year, but also just kind of for all time. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow by Alan Moore. Superman for All Seasons by Jeff Loeb. Action Comics number 775, What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way by Joe Kelly. Superman and the Legion of Superheroes by Jeff Johns. Superman Kryptonite by Darwin Cook. All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison. And Superman by Marv Wolfman. Superman Up in the Sky by Tom King. And then both of these are anthologies, Superman Red and Blue and Superman The World.